There's a lot of different opinions of how you can manage your land. How you can manage your land in your hunt. And so a lot of these have to do with hunt and your ability to actually mold and create and shape and pass and build an actual herd. Because if you're not actually building a herd, what are you doing? If you're not actually building a herd and creating a good hunt, the two go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. Then what are you doing? What's it all for? Now, we have lots of activities around here that promote small game. Everything we do promotes most of the time something for grouse, pheasant, turkey nesting, or rabbits. Those are all indicator species. We do really well at encompassing all those, but I probably wouldn't own the land if it was just for that. I might own a lot smaller chunk just for going out for nice drives on and enjoying some woods and a little bit of space out in the country, but I wouldn't own the acreage we have unless it was purely for deer because I love to deer hunt. That being said, again, lots of different ways to manage your property, but I want you to look at and ask yourself if your land truly is offering the potential that it has. I'd mentioned this in another video and I offended a couple people I noticed in comments, but there are clients when I leave their land that I know that they're probably, I guess, that they're probably not going to do the work. And it's a shame because they hire you to come out. I just don't think people realize how much work it takes to do it right. And I'll say especially, someone will brag about that they have 200 acres or 300 acres, but they're doing enough work to cover 40 acres or 20 acres. And we don't have a complete parcel. You're better off having a complete 40 than a broken 400. Your hunt will actually be better on the 40 than the 400 if you're doing it poorly. So these are some ways, regardless, you throw all that out the window. When I leave a client, I hope they're going to do, I challenge all my clients. I say, at the end of the day, I challenge you to do as much work as you can, as fast as you can, because it's addictive. You find great success, you keep it going. So please do the work. I love to hear that feedback. So when I leave somebody and they're kind of, and we gauge our recommendations all day, it's a conversation. Will you do this? Does this meet your comfort level? And you can even tell sometimes someone will say, yeah, we'll do this. But by the end of the day, you know them enough to say, you told me that you do this, but I can sense a little hesitation there. Are you really going to do that? Well, it might be something we do in the future. I don't want that. I want to do what they're going to do right now. So all that being said, we have plans that we put in place. You have plans for your land. These are 5 great points that you can apply to your parcel and actually ask yourself, does my land pass the test? These are some really good ones. And they're thinking outside the box. These are things that I look at for my own land. You can imagine, going to 1,600 parcels and 26 states throughout the years. This is my 20th season going to properties and doing this all on my own, not having any kind of mentor, all my own concepts. You can imagine I grade myself very critically. And these are different points and strategies that I look at to help know that I'm on the right track. Number 1, what is your daylight mature buck ratio? And I'm talking about within shooting hours, meaning that if it's getting dark at 6 and you're getting a picture at 6:30, quarter to 7, that's pretty good because he's close enough to actually kill him. Maybe it gets light at 7 o'clock in the morning, you're seeing a buck at 6:30. Those count as your ratio. How many of those pictures you're getting from a half hour before daylight to a half hour after daylight versus during the dark? What I find on a high quality property, the best properties, you have more mature bucks during the daylight or in around shooting hours than you do at night. But you have to have a minimum of 1-to-1, meaning 1 picture for every during the daylight around that, you get 1 at night. If you start getting 2 pictures at night to 1 during the day, something's going wrong. And I go to properties where almost all the mature buck pictures are after dark, and that's a really bad thing. Doesn't matter how much money you spend on the habitat, how pretty your food plots are, how perfect your bedding areas are, your water holes, your mock scrapes. If you're getting more pictures during the middle of the night, and especially a lot more during the dark than you are during the daylight, then your property does not pass the test. Number 2, morning versus evening stands. This is a big one. A lot of people say, I don't hunt in the morning. Well, it's one thing if you can't go because of work, you don't feel like getting up. Those are all personal things. But mature bucks move 3 times more during shooting hours, during the morning hours, than they do in the afternoon. That includes midday. So missing those morning hours, and I'm talking especially an hour after daylight to 4 hours after daylight. That's the sweet spot right there. Unless you're in high pressured areas. High pressured areas, you see bucks more and more during the middle of the day because people are simply getting out of their stands and pushing those deer. But a lot of times deer have to rest. So even during the bulk of the rut, there's a period of time in the afternoon where they lay down. So they're primarily moving, all studies show, in the morning, afternoon. Not much during the day, except in high pressure areas, public land areas, maybe opening day of gun season, that type of thing. You can completely throw those quote rules out the window. And mature is all relative. You know, we talk about mature bucks, it's just the older bucks in your area. It might be 3-year-olds, 2-year-olds, might be 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. Who knows? That's all relative. I really want you to focus on this morning versus evening stance. When it comes to hunting, it doesn't matter if you're setting up a hunt for yourself on public land or actually building it on private land. Food sources determine where does and fawns bed, and then you have to have enough room behind that to have bucks. Your food sources can't be where you access, doesn't matter if it's after dark in the evening or before daylight in the morning. You can't access around those food sources during the dark hours because you spook deer. So that means you have to have hidden food sources. You have to have areas for does and fawns to bed next to those food sources within 50 to 100 yards, depending on where you're at, maybe 200 yards in big wilderness areas. And then you have to have room for bucks after that in that 200 to 500 yard area, depending on where you're at. If you have that and you can get around your food, that means that you have morning and evening stands. Morning stands meaning you flip around the backside of that bedding area where those bucks will be, and you wait 300, 400 yards away from the food, 200 yards even, and you wait for those deer to come back to you. That's a morning stand. Then you get out because you can move around those bedding areas. You haven't created any on your access trails, and you can hunt an area closer to the food, which would be the bottom of the funnel of daylight movement, where those deer are coming from multiple bedding areas, going by through a funnel and getting to that afternoon food source. So that being said, you need to have as many morning stands as you do afternoon, and then you have a few in between. So if you only have one morning stand, you have 8 afternoon stands, that's a horrible ratio. You're doing something wrong. It's a very bad property design. Doesn't matter if you came up with it or someone else. You have to have an equal amount of pure morning only stands versus afternoon. And when it comes to hunting strategy and your ability to consistently shoot a target buck, I want to run 100% on shooting target bucks. I want to actually run 150 because I want to shoot at least 1.5 per year to 2 a year, depending on the state I am, and I have how many tags I have. So I've shot, probably close to 4 dozen target bucks, but at least 40 throughout the years. And I want to run a very high percentage on that. And if you have those quality morning stands, that's where I've shot 70% of my mature bucks. Different locations, public or private land. So it's not just a private land thing. I would rather, if I had a choice, I'd pick 2 or 3 of my top morning stands and throw away everything else, because my best opportunity are going to be in those morning stands because deer move 3 times longer. They seem to be more sacred. It's near a buck's bedding area, so it's more defined. But bottom line is you should have at least equal. You have, on a 40-acre parcel, you have 9 stands. You should have 2 or 3 that are morning only, 2 or 3 that are afternoon, or 3 or 4, and then you have 1 or 2 in between that can be considered an all-day sit. Not very many all-day stand locations, because it has to be that perfect X of movement between bedding and afternoon feeding. It can't be too close to the bedding, can't be too close to the feeding, but it has to be in a thick, secure area where a buck's actually going to visit during the daylight, in the middle of the day. So that narrows it down to not very many locations. That's why in a given property, usually there's only about 15, 20% at most, which would be all-day stands, usually closer to 15% or closer to 10 than 20. One really easy checkup, again, how many morning stands you have versus just afternoon stands. Number 3, percentage of efficiency. It's very interesting. If you have a 40-acre parcel and you have one road that goes through the center, and then you have this road that goes over to here to a stand, this road that goes over to here, and let's say you get to this stand location, you hunt with a certain wind. You get to this one, you hunt with a certain wind, you hunt that one with a certain wind, so it's not blowing where you expect to see the deer. The problem is in that 40 acres, to get to those stand locations, you've blown your scent and you've walked through, and deer can see you and hear you on 100% of the land. So in that case, you can't get to a stand without potentially spooking deer off your land. That means you have 0% efficiency. You need to add up the areas where your scent doesn't blow into, deer can't hear you, deer can't see you on your land, and it has to be contiguous, all connected. There's no broken holes in there. It might even be that you have a house So you go up a driveway and your house is right here in the middle of the land. Even then, you can still have an area that's all deer all the time, all the way around in a horseshoe. And if your driveway is long enough, you can even connect it right here. So even in that case, you could still have, on a 40-acre parcel with a house in the middle, you could still have 20 acres. If you can't reach 50% on percentage of efficiency, where it's all deer all the time on your land, then it doesn't pass the test. And on a larger parcel, 80 acres should be more like 60%, 65, 200 acres would be more like 70%, 75%. And that's the actual value of your land. There's a lot of people going back to that 400 acre that doesn't have the improvements and strategy applied to it versus a 40-acre parcel. That 40-acre parcel could have a high percentage, let's say 60, 70, 75%. So they have 28 acres, 26 acres that's all deer all the time, and it's contiguous. It's a nice block. Where that 400-acre parcel, if they're driving all around it, they have a cabin in the middle, they blow their scent here and there to get to stand locations. You can take 400 acres and whittle it down to 10 acres of actual all deer all the time sanctuary area, or none at all, even with a large parcel like that. So in that case, that 40-acre parcel would be worth more for hunting than the 400-acre. And it all boils down to that efficiency. You can always get at least 50%. At least. That's a bare minimum. Even on a 40-acre parcel, bare minimum, 40. Look at these as 1-to-1 ratio. Look at the morning versus evening as 1-to-1. Now this is going to be interesting, does and fawns versus bucks. Hey guys, sorry for the interruption, but I wanted to let you know about a really good deal Ghillie Blinds have with Redneck. They're $100 off. We found this is a great spot for turkey right here and summer buck scouting, but this habitat changes. We can move this, it's on a sled. We'll get it to a new spot for the fall. It's a great tool for your hunting arsenal. Make sure you check out the deal. $100 off, link in the description. Now back to the video. You guys need to listen to this. This is very critical. I've seen a lot of high-end properties that are doing really, really well. Extremely well. What we can see consistently is that you should have, over the course of the season, the number of does and fawns you have should be equal to the number of bucks you are seeing. This is not a sex ratio. This is a doe and fawn versus buck ratio. It's a big difference. These are the amount of bucks you see over the course of an entire season, antlered bucks. Not counting fawn bucks or button bucks, just antlered bucks. Those antlered bucks you see represent an area 5 times greater than the does and fawns that you're seeing as far as a home range, at least 5 times than the does and fawns you're seeing. So you're seeing bucks from a large neighborhood. Does and fawns you're seeing from a very small fraction of that. So the ratio I see is you should have at least as many bucks as does and fawns over the course of a season. So if you tell me, and that's a question I ask my clients in the morning, how many does and fawns are you seeing? You're seeing 15 does and fawns, 20 does and fawns. Well, are you seeing 15 to 20 bucks? And if not, there's a problem. And on good properties, what we see here that I manage, what we see in Wisconsin, what I see on good high-end client properties, after they install the concepts that we're teaching, you usually see twice as many bucks or more than your total number of does and fawns that you see on an average night in October, November. The summertime doesn't matter at all. So if you're counting what you see during the summer, don't. So if you have a bunch of mature bucks during the summer, that's very misleading because you're not doing a very good job. It's only on what you see. If you see a bunch during the summer and not so many, half as many or less during the fall, then you're doing a really bad job. Usually too much pressure during the summer, during the fall, too much hunting on food plots, not enough quality food for the fall and winter, not enough quality cover during the fall and winter. There's a lot of problems that can persist. And that's when we go to a client property, we figure it out. That's a very important ratio. Consider that as 1-to-1, but the best properties are actually 1 doe and fawn for every 2 bucks. And again, those bucks are reflective of a huge area. It's not a sex ratio. It's just a property, high-end property management area. You know what's interesting? You go to a lot of public land settings where I've shot mature bucks or bucks, good bucks on public land. I usually see more bucks than does because I'm not hunting in the doe and fawn areas. I'm hunting in the buck areas. And where I'm at, in the areas I choose to hunt, doesn't matter if it's private and you build it or public and you find it, that's where I choose to hunt. I'm going to ask Dylan without even knowing this answer. I'm just kind of curious. Dylan had a camera that he let soak on public land in Wisconsin last year.
Yeah.
And you went and picked it. I was just curious, how many does, I know it was a remote area, or you probably would have been there more often, but did you see any kind of a ratio there? I'm just curious.
Where that one was specifically, the bucks that I had on camera were very mature bucks. Unfortunately, they were white deer, so I couldn't shoot them.
Oh, jeez, that stinks.
Actually, yeah, there was very few does, but the big bucks were definitely there.
Would you have seen more? Do you think you saw more unique bucks in that location than does, or they're just older? Like number wise.
I'm sorry, say again?
Like number wise.
I don't know. I just thinking off the top of my head, I probably had 5 bucks that I would have shot if they were ground.
Oh, so really nice mature ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious, but that's what you end up seeing in areas. Doesn't matter if it's public or private land. Those are the areas I want to hunt, and you can do it on your land. And then number 5, interior versus exterior edge ratio. And this will tell you a lot about the quality of the habitat on your public land hunt or what you're doing on your private land. Let's just say you have a square 40. That square 40, 440 yards, obviously a mile of exterior edge. Add up your interior edge. Your interior edge, you have a lake right here. You go around that lake, that's edge. You have a food plot here, a food plot here. You have a timber cutting here where they harvested some timber. You have a variety of habitat where it changes to one thing here, gets closer by the swamp. All those are edges over and over and over again. They're all edges. Those edges on the inside, your interior edge should be several times greater than your exterior edge of your property itself. The opposite of that is a 40-acre hardwood parcel that's all hardwoods, all even age, all the same kind, like a stand of maple, a stand of oak even. Let's say you have 40 acres of oak. Horrible. Because you have no interior edge. That means it's not going to be attractive for wildlife. And a lot of times we look at hunt-wise, you look at those aerial photos when you're scouting for public land or looking at your own private land parcel, you should see lots of color and lots of different small blocks and larger blocks. Larger blocks are big hardwood, open timber, oaks. For example, in May, a lot of the colored tops will be oak because they're the last to leaf out, and then the green tops, light green sometimes is aspen, black smears are more swampland, lowland, shrubs, conifer. So you should be able to see that, let alone wetland areas. So you'll be able to see all those edges taking place in a property. That signifies diversity. And when you have diversity, not only deer are creatures of edge, but small game in general, all you need their unique set of different types of habitat. And so when you find a lot of that going on in one spot, then you have a great spot to hunt. And on public land, it really sticks out because there's not a lot of diversity, especially when you go from county land to then state land, then to finally federal land. Federal land's the worst. So really look for that diversity, and you'll find that you need to have that ratio be several times greater on the interior edge than your exterior. These are some great ways. I want all of these. I don't want 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4, 4 out of 5. These are all attainable on your parcel, anywhere we go to. These are all great tests. Pass these tests right here, you'll have built a great parcel, you'll have a great plan if you're headed in that direction, or you'll have found a great spot to hunt on public land. I love looking at these because these are things we look at on client properties when we go there. There's a lot that goes into a day-long client visit. All these concepts right here, and especially these core ones right here, and there's some more, we've actually infused these into our digital land management platform that we're building through whitetailstrategy.com. I encourage you to check that out. But you can obviously imagine if you take a food plot and put it here, you change an access route, put it here, you put a cabin here, it could destroy or make your parcel. So imagine being able to take those pieces, putting them on an aerial photo, and then looking and seeing what happens with your land and where it puts those bucks and where those hot spots are of doe bedding, finding it on public land, giving us those variables, and then we spit it back out and give you those outputs and say, this is what it looks like. Imagine being able to play with your private land. Let's put a food plot here. Let's put a cabin here. Let's see how it affects things. That's what we're building. So for information, you can look for the description of this video, sign up, go to whitetailstrategy.com. So when information is available about digital land management will come out, that's something that's my concepts being built. It's my platform, my company, and I have some partners with that too, but I can't wait to bring that to you. Check that out when it comes. That's all of this infused into that. And because let's face it, boots on the ground are always better to actually come to your property and check it out. But this is a great way to get you really close to putting boots on the ground at a lot cheaper price. So make sure you check that out too. And I hope your land passes the test for this season.